Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the School of Facilitation online gathering. Today, my guest is Mark Walsh, and Mark is an embodied facilitator. And he came onto my radar about 5 years ago. I went to a coaching circle in London and to be part of this embodied coaching session for 2 hours, this man called Mark Walsh. And my friend and I, we arrived early and we were sitting in the corner of a circle, if that's physically possible, I don't know. And we were just sitting there talking, and then we were both writing. And then suddenly Mark comes over and goes, "Oh, can I take your photograph?" And Damien and I looked at him and went, yes. Why? He said, because you're sitting in perfect symmetry, and it's a really good example that I could use in some of my classes. And I just thought, oh, okay, interesting. And then he started the group, and one of the first things Mark said, which I just thought was brilliant, he had over 30 coaches, facilitators, trainers sat in a big circle in London. And he said, look, I really acknowledge we're all in the same space here. We all come from the same background in that we are coaches and trainers and facilitators. And I just want you to know you've got a choice, two choices you can make tonight. One is you can show up and be curious and put your own knowledge to one side, or you can sit there in judgment of me and go, I wouldn't do it like that. I wouldn't do it like that. He'll probably say it differently, but anyway, he was quite blunt and quite black and white, and I just thought, yeah, just name it, because there were people in that room that you could see were probably going to get a little bit uppity. And he said, look, the invitation is just come and join in, come and have an experience. And that just set the tone for me. So Mark has always been on my radar as someone who I'm curious to know more about. And as I've been going through my own journey to grow as a facilitator and trainer, embodiment is something that I'm getting more aware of and diving deeper into. So to have Mark as my guest today is brilliant. And if I'm going to be really honest with you, a lot of these questions are things that I want to ask him. So I think there'll be things that you guys are curious to know about as well in terms of facilitation. So Mark, welcome. That's a long preamble. Mark, when we talk about embodiment, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. First of all, I thought your intro was much more eloquent than mine was. I think I just said, don't be a wanker. So I thought your version of it was much more polite. And sometimes I do that somatically. Sometimes I say to people, meaning through the body, I'll say, like, look at your body right now. Like, is this the perfect setup for being on a webinar? Right? Are you as open as you'd like to be? Are you as awake as you'd like to be? Are you as curious as you'd like to be? Because those states have bodily correlates. Yeah. So sometimes I come to a workshop and people are, they're sort of looking down their nose. Let's all do that. Let's all be experts. So I invite you to lean back, cross your arm, put your chin up a little bit, and just sort of look down your nose at me and Kirsty like, who do these people think now? I'm a coach. I've been doing this a long time. Which may be true, and you probably know a lot of stuff, right? So just notice if that's familiar. That's the first thing. And then stop that, please, for the love of God. And now choose how to be for the next 50 minutes. So choose how to sit, choose how to breathe, choose how to pay attention. It's your choice, right? So this is not a neutral thing. Some of you haven't moved at all, which even meant you were already in the perfect manner, or you just can't be bothered to play. If there's something you don't want to do today, that is totally okay, by the way, if you'd prefer not to play any of my little games. Although I find people just get a lot more if they eat the food rather than read the menu, if people, it's experiential work. So one way I explain, to come back to your question, Kirsty, when people say, what is embodiment? If I'm in corporates, I might say it's interactive or experiential learning. I might leave it at that. I might even use the word embodiment. But the basic idea of embodiment is we're relating to the body as part of who we are. So rather than the body as an object, as a piece of meat, as a brain taxi, the body as part of our being. And often I find for coaches these days, I don't have to explain too much. I could get much more in depth, much more rigorous. I could give exercises to demonstrate it. But I find I've been teaching coaches for a while, and I find these days most of the coaches I know, I meet, get that the body matters. And my job is to just give them some sort of practical tools for working with that. They already understand that we're a holism. And there's other people who work with language or other things, and that's fine. There's lots of great ways to coach. So I'm definitely not saying this is the only one, but it's one that I like. And it's one that I find goes deep pretty quickly and also sticks with people. You know, we remember what we do with the body much more than just words. So like, you know, if a day from now I asked you to recall like the first 10 minutes of this call, you'd probably recall this exercise and not the blah, blah, blah that me and Kirsty have been saying. So a little bit preempting the question of why embodiment, like why bother, right? Why not just talk about it?
And so, yeah, why bother with embodiment then?
Because of that, because it goes deep quickly and it sticks and it is part of who we are. So our embodiment is affecting our perception, cognition, coaching, leadership, and it's either happening unconsciously or consciously. So like right now, you're viewing me and this talk through the lens of your embodiment. So it'd be kind of nice to know what that is, right? And we all have a habitual style. Like I tend to be quite challenging in my coaching. And that's set up in my system. If you look at a picture of me at 3 years old, I have that body. I'm sort of leaning forwards. I'm like, come on, you know, what do you want? You know, like I've got that combative embodiment. So I need to know about that so that, yes, some clients that works great with. Other clients are going to be just brutalized by that. So I need to be aware of that and then step out of that into something else if it's going to be helpful. Both as
actually on that, how much do you think people are aware of their embodied stance, that like you just described? How many your experience of talking?
Well, I wouldn't have a job if it was very much. I mean, you know, it depends what level of detail we go to. You know, did you wake up on the in-breath or the out-breath, for example, this morning? So that would be a very fine level of detail of embodied awareness, right? Do you tend to have your chin slightly up or down? Your vision, does it tend to be more narrow or more wide? Does your breathing tend to be more chest or more belly? Does your weight tend to be more forwards or back? Like if you look at the pictures and go top right and go from speaker view to gallery view, you'll see very different embodiments. And we're just seeing the little, you know, most people's case, just the top bit, but you can see some very different ways of being, you know. And if you're over 30, you know, you're responsible for your face. Like where did that face come from? It came from a habitual embodiment. Right? Have you got these wrinkles from being angry all the time, or these ones from being anxious all the time? Yeah, there's other factors like genetics and, you know, Botox or other things. But, you know, there's a way in which we start to form into what we practice. And that's what embodiment's all about, is what we formed into. And then we become aware of that. And if we're aware of that, we can make a different choice. Yeah. Right? So that's basically everything I have to teach. You can go to the pub now.
We can finish now. So how did you get to where you are today? What is it? What's the journey that you've been through to get here?
We asked me this earlier, and my 3-word answer was kind of failure, drug addiction, and trauma. And that's true. But if I were to have 3 sort of positive words, would be possibility, Aikido, and love. So, you know, my story basically was that I was cognitively a genius growing up, like actually top 0.01% IQ. But by the time I was a teenager, I was absolutely miserable and suicidal and unethical and failing at relationships. And basically I'd realized that education had said, what matters is book learning. And I was like, yeah, but I've read every book in the library, literally in my sixth form. It's like high school if you're not British. And I was absolutely miserable and just failing in multiple ways, ethically, emotionally, whatever. So I'm left with this question at 16, like, hey, if I'm so smart, why am I so fucked up? Right? That was my question. And at that point, I realized there's different ways to be smart. And I'd been told a complete lie about education. Like I'd been told that education was learning about things. And then I guess what I was discovering, that there was emotional intelligence, we could call it ontological learning, learning about our being and how we are as people. And then I just dived into that. And the first thing I dived into was martial arts. And because I was involved in various illegal activities at the time, and martial arts seemed like a good idea up in Leeds, big bag city. And in martial arts, I saw a new way of being. I saw a new possibility. And I saw a way of developing oneself that was beyond merely cognitive. And this is the same with business leaders, right? Someone might have got an MBA or read all the books, but be a terrible leader. Or if I said to you, Kirsty, I'm a fantastic lover because I've read a lot of books on kissing, you would be like intuitively you would know there's other ways to learn other than cognitively, right? Like we all get that, but like it's like an airplane pilot, we want to have practiced, flying before we let them in a plane, so they have simulators. So I realized this was really like a common sense on the one hand, but also totally missing from our education system. And I just got so much from Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art I was studying. And eventually I realized, well, it's not just Aikido. There's also things to be learned from Tango and meditation and all these different embodied arts that have sort of different angles on things. And I realized most people aren't going to do Aikido because it's too much work. And who wants to be thrown around? It's hard work. But there was some really good stuff within that I could bring out and give to other people. And then sort of reinvented the wheel of what's sometimes called somatic education or embodied learning. And then I went, well, hang on a minute, other people must have done this. And at that point, I went and got some mentors.
Okay. And then, so that's really interesting. So you had that moment, you had that childhood, that upbringing, the Aikido, and I've heard that it happened in my family as well. My brother went into Taekwondo. He was the Manchester version of you, by the way, in the Leeds version. He went to Taekwondo. Then I've noticed like the Embodied Facilitator has been around since around 2007. So you created a community, you're creating a space for people to come and learn and connect. What was missing for you in the world that led you to create this space for coaches, facilitators, yogis? Because it's not just...
Yeah, nice question. So when I was teaching in business, first of all, I was working non-profit sector in war zones. Hey, doggy. And then I was working in business. And then other coaches would say, well, how do you do body stuff in business? Isn't that too weird? Or is there... And I would say, no, it's really easy if you do it in a certain way. So we did a few one-day events. And then I kind of like, people were asking me for more. And I said, well, what's the course I would have liked to have done that I had to sort of run around the world finding different teachers doing? So we put that course together. That's EFC, the Embodied Facilitator course. It's in UK and Russia now. And I guess for me, the thing was missing we said it was multiple perspective, pragmatic approach. It's pragmatic. It's not sort of hippie, new agey. There's plenty of good body stuff out there, but it's a bit hippie. It's not going to go down well in business. And then I love that stuff myself, but you can't approach things that way. In too many unicorns doesn't go down well. And then the other way was just that I also saw a lot of sort of guru-based stuff. Teachers saying, this is the one true way and you have to follow me. And I was just like, most of my students are kind of grown-ups. They're people that have done NLP or emotional intelligence, and maybe they do yoga or maybe they do dance. And I needed something that would bring multiple perspectives together, but not just as a sort of postmodern swamp, but would actually integrate them in a way which would say, yes, there's still standards of excellence. There's still some things can be better or worse than others. We have an exam, at the end of it. So it's like we need to have some standards as well as the diversity. So that I think is really the sort of unique piece of it is this no guru, multiple perspectives type style. There's other very good people in this field, but they generally don't have that multiple perspectives type approach. And so
I know so let's build on that again. So I know you've been doing lots of study and you've been working to map the world of embodiment and bring it to life for people. So you have the Embodied Podcast, you have the Embodied Facilitator course, and last year you went super ambitious and put on the Embodied Conference, which you and your team pulled off within a 3-month time frame, which I find incredible. You have one-day courses as well. So what are some of the core elements, some of those core skills that you talk about within those embodied skill sets?
Yeah, so one model we've been using is looking at this in terms of form of intelligence or in terms of pragmatic skill sets, because otherwise it can sound esoteric or, a little bit abstract, like what am I actually trying to develop? So we took Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence and developed that into Can I screen share? Actually, it's probably the easiest way.
I think we should be able to. Let's experiment.
How's that?
Yes.
Unexpected error. Okay, so can you all see that diagram there?
I can, yeah. So I think
simple. We have a more complex version now, but give me a thumbs up if you can see that quadrant. Yeah, you know, you're actually, as a trainer, you're actually contracted by Satan to actually have at least one 2x2 matrix every day. That's that's the law. So basically what we can see there is that this how am I, that you need to know as a trainer or coach your own embodied state and also your own embodied disposition. So we could take each of these boxes and put it into 2 time frames. So state is like, how are you right now? So everyone in the chat, please write how you are right now. You have 3 seconds.
Oh, I don't think oh yeah, we can.
If you can't do it in 3 seconds, it's too late because you're transmitting that, right? You also have your embodied dispositions, and these are much harder to get. Like, cross your arms. Everyone try crossing their arms, assuming you're not driving. And then cross them the other way. Yeah? And what you'll feel is one way is weird. Same with fingers. You can do this with fingers. And this is what we have to do to reveal our patterns of sort of longer term embodiment, because they're invisible. You can't just ask people. The arm crossing one's pretty neutral, but let's say, are you more yes or more no, right? Now we have shapes to explore that. And that's not neutral at all. You know, some clients are, you know, some coaches are very much empathic, but maybe going along with things a little bit too much, whereas some coaches are much more boundary setting, sort of kick ass, and both are useful skill sets. So to reveal how we are can take a bit of work, and normally we need some exercises for that. And then of course, it's not enough just to know how you are, you also need to manage yourself, right? So this would be things like centering exercises, state regulation exercises. I wrote a whole book on centering. It's a big topic. For example, one thing I'll often do with coachees at the beginning of sessions is a very quick centering exercise just to reduce their fight-flight arousal. Because I don't know about you guys, but most of my clients are coming to a session pretty stressed, or at least so busy that they're in that hyper-arousal. Is that similar to your clients most of the time?
Yeah.
Yes, no,
yeah.
Nod loudly or shake loudly so I can see. Great. So for example, I'll do a centering exercise. It'll be something very simple. I mean, it could just be silence like we did at the beginning. That's very nice. Or, I mean, should we do a quick one now?
Go on then.
Okay, so let's do ABC. So A is awareness, feel your body. You know, a very quick body scan. And B is balance. Bring your body into a little more balance. So from on a chair, that might mean finding that point where it's more stable. And you can also balance your awareness all around you. So you're aware of the whole room, the floor and the ceiling. And C is core relaxation. So relax your tongue, relax your belly. You could add things like, think of someone you care about, someone who makes you smile. So who feels a little more relaxed than 45 seconds ago? Most people, I would imagine. Yeah. So it's not rocket science, but it's a bit more than mindfulness, because you're actually doing something. You're not just paying attention. That's the A, is the mindfulness, right? Mm-hmm. So there's various centering techniques. That's a simple one that I teach a lot of people. We learn to self-regulate. So as coaches, that's really important, that we can regulate ourselves as coaches, I would say, first of all, because the state transmission we're giving is huge. That's a huge part of what coaching is. Yeah. You know? That's the bottom right, the influencing side. So we need to regulate for that. And also, how do we change or develop ourselves over time if we look at this second time frame? So as coaches, what are we practicing? What ways of being are we building in ourselves? So a lot of the work I work with coaches, they practice for a couple of months doing different things, and then they pick a practice and they commit to it. And they might commit to salsa dancing or 5 rhythms dancing or karate or, you know, 100 other things to develop themselves, develop their embodied being. Because you can't just talk about this. You know, in an hour we can map the territory, but you need to go practice. If you want to get good, like languages or driving a car or anything else, you need to practice. And then the last one we haven't really looked at is the empathy side. So the top right is actually this look like body reading, so that's more cognitive, but then also the empathic resonance of, you know, like when I go on the phone to a coachee and I hear their breath, and their breath is like this, so everyone close their eyes. So their breath is like, okay, and already I should have an opinion about their emotional state. It's enough data. Or someone knocks on the door and they knock like this. It's already giving me an opinion about their embodiment. Now it's just a guess, right? We have to be careful with this. We have to have some humility around this. But being able to read bodies, being able to have empathy, you know, being able to tune in, there's bodily things.
Yeah.
So these are core skill sets of any coach, I would say. And you can't take the body out of them. Like impact and influence, the body's involved. You know, if I'm like, hello, I'm your motivational speaker today, I'm here to inspire you. It's just doesn't matter. You know, I work with translators a lot, and what's really interesting is my jokes or my charisma or whatever are impacting way before the interpreters translated what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. Like this is embodied transmission. Like I'm in Russia one time, this dog comes up on this train, we're doing this training in the woods, and this aggressive dog is there, and I'm like, calm down. I like dogs. Dogs like me. Dogs are nice. I am nice. And the dog starts being relaxed. And my students were like, this is amazing. This dog speaks English. And the dog doesn't speak English. The dog just responding to the fact that I'm dominant but friendly, which is, you know, usually a pretty good embodiment to convey when speaking to an aggressive dog.
Oh my
God. Mapping the territory. I feel like I've talked a lot. Is this giving a sense?
No, that's good. So the 4 main embodied skill sets were embodied self-awareness, embodied self-management, embodied social awareness.
Yeah, it's like empathy, social awareness, yeah.
And then I missed the 4th one because I couldn't.
Leadership. Social influence.
Actually, you talked about practice in that.
Yeah.
As you were, and I watched a video yesterday, and I love that you talk about practice and how essential it is when we're learning something new. And as humans, many of us know that I am one of these classics that I start something with gusto, I love it, and then some things really hold, and I practice, and other things sort of dip and come back up again. I was really curious about what have you noticed about those who do their practice?
And
what then sets them apart from others?
So the power of practice is an obsession for most embodiment teachers. So Ginny Whitelaw, Richard Stracey Heckler, Wendy Palmer, you know, all the different embodiment teachers in this field that I respect. This is something we all talk about in different ways. Sometimes it's not easy, right? Like who's ever tried to go on a diet or go to the gym and then tried and then it hasn't lasted too long. So I think there's mapping how that practice generally goes. You know, there's a sort of honeymoon period, and then there's a dip, and in the dip is when you want to get the personal trainer, you know, and then there's a stabilization. So knowing how that process goes can be quite helpful. Social support is massively helpful. So like on EFC, even though we're only meeting a few times, people have a small group and they meet up with that group once a week on Zoom actually. So that can be very helpful. Accountability can be very helpful. Getting really clear, like what you're trying to build and why. So people are really clear, like this is why I'm going to the gym. This is why I'm going to karate. Like that I think is very helpful to people. And then we also look at what we call trolls of learning. So this is an idea that I took from Newfield Coaching, who I work with, of looking at what gets in the way of our learning. You know, like I've got to, like some of these can be cultural, right? Like having to be an expert. Like when I work with the French, for example, there's one, I have to be an expert and I don't want to look good. I don't want to look bad. And I'm like, okay, well, how can you learn? You know, like the cultural barriers. British people, it might be, I always want to make jokes, right? It's a very British one. And it's like, well, that, not all British people, you know, you could be a French person with that same troll, but there are cultural patterns we see that are embodied. And these can get in the way of learning. So really naming those trolls is important too. And on EFC, it's like there's a lot of accountability. There's a lot of peer support. There's a lot of challenge. And if people don't do the practice, we chuck them off the course as well. So there is you know, there is real consequence there. So there's with the support first, obviously, I should say. Yeah. And, you know, life situations sometimes get in the way. But there's, I think it's actually not an easy question. How do we really establish a practice? And even with all those things, it's still not the easiest thing in the world. So, yeah, I mean, I'm 2 months into going to the gym now, having not done that for a while. and it's not really an embodied practice. It's just something I wanted to start doing in the mornings for fitness. You know, fitness and embodiment aren't always the same, right? Like you can do a lot of embodiment that's very gentle and relaxed. It's very aware, but it's not getting you fit. And fitness, you can be watching TV and not doing embodiment. Yeah. I just decided I want to start going to the gym just to be fit. And you know what? The first month is like a lot of enthusiasm. And then there's this sort of period where it's like, oh, I'm not quite getting the results, but it's like, oh, it's kind of hard work and I get busy again. At this point, this is where you need the coach and the peer accountability. So knowing this, I'd already booked a bunch of PT sessions in advance for month 2. And now I'm getting towards the end of month 2. I'm starting to see some results. It's becoming a habit, right? It's like, okay, yep, it's Tuesday, I go to the gym. So because I've done that with a lot of other stuff, that process was way more likely to succeed for me than most people. You know, 90% of people that join a gym in January aren't there in March.
Correct.
But 90% of those who are there in March are there in December.
Yeah.
Right? So I knew that's the difficult second month.
Out of curiosity, for all of you guys listening, when you've maybe started something new or you're learning, what is it that, and you've stuck to it, can you identify what has been, I don't know, a driving force? That sounds too big, but like, what is it that has been within you that's enabled you to continue? If you want to put it in the chat box, that would be great. For me, I decided after my 40th, literally the day after my 40th birthday party, which was massive, I will admit, on the alcohol front, I stopped drinking for 1.5 years. And I had, at the end of that 1.5 year period, though, I was doing a massive challenge. I was sailing across the Atlantic as a team, and I just knew that I wanted to get fit, I wanted to get healthy. I also recognized there need to be some big changes in my life anyway, from various other factors, like from the emotional piece, the health piece. And but what I found is, because I really believed it was important for me and it had a value attached to it, I found it really easy not to drink, even though I had all that peer pressure and that social, oh, you're so boring, occurring. And it was a big part of my life. So I'm just curious what other people notice. So we've got social support, doing things in a group, and variety, the accountability piece. Esther, clear understanding of its importance.
Yeah, Laura said something interesting, attaching it to a habit. So like, for example, let's say I'm trying to embed centering with students, which is one thing they practice 5 times a day on the course. But first of all, just reminding them, so we get their iPhones out and they set 5 alarms, right? But then you can also do what Laura's suggested, which is just to link it to something. So like every time you go to the toilet, every time you make a cup of tea, every time you turn your email on, you send a text message. So you linking it to something can be really helpful too. So that's a nice one.
Yeah, I like the
social support. A lot of people have said, haven't they?
And Laura B, like daily practice every day, and that's the bit I find the hardest, the everyday piece sometimes in some of my practices, and that's the bit I'm sort of putting and time. Sometimes I find time is my excuse. I haven't got the time, or I'm rushing off to clients in
time's always priorities, but it's what we've found as well is like how to get the most bang for your buck. So at EFC we've gone through various ways to help people establish different practices and embodiment, and we find that a morning mindfulness session is really helpful. And before you sort of turn your social media and your email on, so starting the day well, normally bookending with some kind of reflection or journal at the end. And then little micro hits throughout the day, these 5, 1 minute hits throughout the day. And then a couple of times a week, a bigger block, like a yoga class. And we find that sort of bookending the micro hits and the blocks, plus every 2 or 3 months, an intensive where people get really re-inspired. Like you think of it in terms of like cycles, like certain religions are very good at this, don't they? They have like a daily prayer cycle and an annual cycle, So you need to think of it in terms of concentric cycles or kind of fractal cycles. And because you can't just be doing it full on the whole time, everyone's busy.
Yeah.
So those little micro hits and the bookending is what we found is helpful. And there's other pieces here as well. Like people can have a solo practice, but it never transfers to other people. So you might need to go from, say, a solo meditation or yoga exercise to something a bit more social at some point, so that it's not just stuck on the mat, we call that, You get a keto teacher that's really good at throwing someone around, but their life's a mess. They haven't transferred it. So the key piece about transfer, I would say, is critical for embodiment.
Esther's just put in the chat box, I like that. Give myself permission to miss it from time to time, then restart. keeping the longer journey in mind, therefore take off perfection pressure.
Nice. There's loads of stuff on this though. If you look at like Keegan has a nice thing about counter commitments, and there's like atomic habits. I mean, there's a whole body of work on establishing habits
and understanding that. As I've gone through getting to know you and thinking more about embodiment, I was wondering the benefits of diving into the world of embodiment. So there's the benefits from our perspective as the practitioner, but I'm also curious about the end user of us, which are our clients, our coachees, our learners, our participants, and the benefits to them of us becoming more embodied.
Yeah, I mean, we all have these techniques that we love, but at the end of the day, people don't give a crap, right? They just want to see results. So for me, it's just saying like, look, if you want the result, whatever you're interested in, you need to include the body in that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get a deep result that sticks, that's necessary. Actually, I just wrote a book on embodiment. Actually, it's just in its final editing stages now. And one of the first thing is like 10 reasons you might want to learn embodiment. Because to me it was kind of obvious, but I sent a draft of the book to someone and they said, look, you need to say up front why, because to me this is just my life, And I think one very valid answer is just to be human. For me, this is about living fully as a human, to experiencing oneself, to not be cut off from oneself. And then we say, okay, if embodiment is the opposite of dissociation, embodiment's about being present to the body, right?
Yeah.
Embodiment's about the opposite of not being cut off from oneself. What are we cut off from? And then the answer becomes things like our values. That's pretty important, right? Or creativity, or intuition, our emotional intelligence. What are we cut off from? Even our ethics. Like if we're cut off from our body, we're a nightmare. And like, imagine you're on the tube and you're rushing and you're not really feeling yourself because you're in such a rush. You're like a temporary psychopath at that point. Like other people are just objects in your way. Like I've done it. Like I'm an embodiment teacher, right? It's like, get out of my way. You're just a thing. So when we objectify ourselves, we also objectify others and the planet. So this is like the deepest, most ethical answer to this in terms of why it matters.
Yeah.
And then there's just very practical, there's very practical answers to this. If someone's a leader and they want to be compelling, like the thing I did earlier about sort of, hello, am I compelling when I'm just completely cut off from myself, or when I'm expressive and present and animated? Do you want to be able to play with your kids? Do you want to be able to manage yourself in meetings so you don't make an idiot of yourself by freaking out because you didn't get your way? It depends on the client, right? But these are all basic, these are just ways of talking about the embodiment skills that we've discussed earlier.
Nice.
Is that a cat? Elizabeth's got a cat. It's
I know, all the animals are joining in. Look at that white tail.
Plus 1 points for cats.
What other lovely questions? Tell us a bit more about the ways that people can connect and get involved with embodiment. What could they be doing for themselves?
Feeling their own bodies. So I think that's the primary one, isn't it? I mean, I would really recommend every coach develop some kind of a body practice, and that the minimum would be just checking in with themselves a few times a day. Maybe some minimal centering, maybe a bit of meditation, body-based meditation in the morning, and preferably some kind of what I call a more macro practice, like a yoga practice, or minimal I'd say is just do something you enjoy, right? Move. What do you enjoy? You want to dance tango? You want to fight people? You want to do yoga? Whatever, just find something you enjoy. There's something for everyone out there, I think. I don't train like I used to train I used to do cage fighting in my 20s. Now I'm like, nah, something more gentle, So there's different things for different people, different times of life, different preferences. So I'd say that's the minimum thing. And if you find an embodiment teacher who doesn't have a practice, run a mile. Run a mile. But that should be for embodiment teachers. That's absolutely essential. But I'd say for all coaches, it's helpful just to kind of do a bit of yoga or something. And then, they can listen to my podcast. They can read books by Paul Linden or Strozzi or, Wendy, one of the writers out there. They can join a group. There's different things people can do practically.
I heard you talk about your perspective of yoga and mindfulness, and my language is it's like a double-edged sword. So there's the good and the unethical side of these practices. I was wondering if you could talk
all day about that. Who's a yoga? Give me a wave if you're a yoga.
It really made me smile because I could relate to it. So our headline, and Mark will embellish, but Mark was saying, and this is my experience. So I took up yoga. I can remember starting it, and at that time, for me, it was a sport, and therefore I had to get good at it, and it was about looking around the room, so I was learning, but there was always that part of me which like, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do I get better? And there was the inner chat, the inner dialogue, so it was all about that sort of doing it right and doing it correctly, and as you say, it's more than that though, and I am learning it is more than that now.
Yeah, I mean, let's use yoga as a case study to explore the themes. So just out of interest, who does a bit of yoga? Give me a wave. And who does a lot of yoga? Is anyone like hardcore yogi? Great. Okay. So I developed something called Embodied Yoga Principles, which is a way to bring embodied principles into yoga. After sort of, for a long time, I was quite dissatisfied with a lot of yoga. I'd find it was more fitness orientated, which I now would say is fine, but it's not embodiment. It's fine to be fit, right? You do pull-ups, that's fine, it's no problem. But you're not working with awareness. Traditional yoga, I say, would work with awareness, but it can be reduced to a kind of fitness thing, a body beautiful thing, or even a externally orientated practice, which is the opposite of embodiment, right? If all my attention's on how I look, it's going to be very difficult to inhabit myself. This is why sometimes dancers can be hard to teach embodiment to as well, actually, like performance dancers. So I think there's the challenges of it in the modern context of actually a body objectification, but even traditional yoga, like, I mean, is it building the skill you need? So what are you doing in a yoga class? You're being told how to sit, breathe, stand, and move, right? Like the traditional yoga class, like an Iyengar yoga class, so, which I still like, I still go to. So who here needs to be more disciplined at doing what they're told? Me. So that's probably not a bad practice for me. Some of you, however, are far too good at doing what you're told. You'd be better off going to a free dance class and actually going crazy and feeling yourself like 5 rhythms and moving, because that might be a better skill for you to build. Yeah. So I would really question what you're practicing in any class, because often people just practice their neurosis, right? Like I'm in a big yoga studio in London, and there's a yin class and a rocket class. So these are sort of opposite ends of the spectrum of yoga, right? And I go into the rocket class, it's all like type A personality, guys from the city, like, right, we're going to hit just yoga. We do the best yoga. I'm going to rock the yoga. And I'm like, right, maybe you need to go to the yin class. And then I go to the yin class and everyone's like, hi, welcome. It's really nice to see you. Oh, you're new, come in. And I'm just like, swap, right? Because that would, people are just deepening what they're already good at, which is fine, just for fun. But if you want to build awareness, range, and choice, which is the fundamental thing I work with, awareness, range, and choice,
okay,
then you need to find a practice which doesn't, isn't so comfortable. So like people will come to my course as salsa dancers and I'll send them to karate, or they'll come as a coach and they've got a rocket yoga practice and I'll send them to yin yoga. So it's to build a bit of range. And there's nothing wrong with just doing stuff you like sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm doing a lot of Feldenkrais right now, which is a really slow practice. And it's fucking torture for me. But it's really, like, as you can see, I'm quick. So it's really good for me to slow down, you know? So that's like my practice for the year that I've just started. So like choose your practice based upon what you're trying to build as a person, because that's what embodied practice is, as opposed to a fitness practice, which is something different.
And I love, there's an interview you were doing with someone and you talk about a 2-hour session that you run for a group in Russia. And what I really noticed is you took people to their edges within a 2-hour experience. So you did, was it an Aikido session? Then you went through some art reconnecting, and then you went to play and you had them rolling around the floor like kittens.
Yeah.
The way I thought about it in my head was, and the way you talk about some of the people in the room is you took them to their edges. You took them to places that they were like, I'm really super uncomfortable right now. And you say, well, actually, that's a good thing, because you need to know what your edges are. You need to know where you're comfortable, but you also need to know where you're uncomfortable, because that will show you even more about your embodied experience and like how your body reacts in those moments.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm not always saying we have to be sort of, there's this myth in personal growth always has to be difficult and hard. And, I wouldn't always go into that, because pleasure can also be a real friend for people in embodied work, because pleasure calls us back to the body, right? We can Pavlovianly condition ourselves to be more embodied by orientating to pleasure. However, if we want to build emotional more range, then we're going to need to do things that are emotionally uncomfortable. Because like this again, right? One way feels more comfortable than the other way. And in that particular session, I do like a really hardcore martial arts session where I'm like the Japanese sensei from hell, which I've had, shouting at people and really full on. And there's still ethics and consent. It's not quite as old school as some of the teachers I've had. And then we do a play session where people are rolling around on the floor and giggling and playing like kittens with each other. And most people find one half of that hard.
Yeah, nice.
And that's because they're limited in what they can do. Like, think of this in terms of human potential. Most people are hammers and everything looks like nails, or they're screwdrivers and everything looks like screws, right? So do we want to be less limited? Do we want to be able to build range so we can be, like, we use a 4 elements model, for example, and we'll do air practices that are really fun and silly, and earth practices that are very exact and really full on driving yang fiery practices, and then receptive, soft water practices. To build coaches range, then you can take that to clients, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people can find this online. There's a brainstorming exercise where I do 4 elements with clients, and loads of YouTube videos. There's about 1,000 YouTube videos, by the way, if you're curious. Some of this stuff's easier to see than to hear about, all free. So like, you take a client through the 4 elements and you say, well, maybe they're like, I don't know if I should move house, or should I take this promotion, some practical thing. And they've only thought about it from one way, which is their habitual embodiment. And then all of a sudden you open up 2 or 3 new ones, and they're like, wow, in the space of 10 minutes, literally 10 minutes, they're just seeing a world of new possibilities that they can take on board.
Question from Caroline. What are your thoughts on environment for embodiment?
Yeah, I hope I answered this in the way she means. So we're always embodied in place. Yeah. So we're always, like, the fact that I'm at home in Brighton right now is significant. This is one of the weird things about Zoom, actually, is we're all in a different place. So we don't have a shared embodied context, which of course you would if you're in the same room as someone. And I think embodiment generally helps us feel our environment more, which has an impact on environmental issues, if that's what you mean, Caroline. In that, when we're feeling ourselves, it's just like, I was in Moscow, and a lot of the old communist buildings in Moscow are just so unpleasantly ugly. They're brutal in their architecture. And I just went, oh, only a not feeling person would want to be around this kind of building. There's something that just in you just feels, which is the point, right? It's dehumanizing architecture. It's part of social control as well. So for me, there's a profound connection. And we find that when we do retreats in nature, in the countryside, people go way deeper into their body than when we do them in the city of London. If I can get a group to do a retreat, all the better. But then it's also good to take it back to the city so people can apply it and not have to be on retreat, Does that answer the question, Caroline? So I sort of hit it from a couple of angles there, yeah? Cool, good question. And then the social context too, right? The cultural context. I've lived in 6 or 7 countries, and each of them left their impact on my embodiment. So I've got a Brazilian thing I've got going on now, and I can be American and take space and do loads of marketing, which British people are shit at normally. And I can be Russian and just be like absolutely terrifying if need be. Like, these are all embodiments that I've taken on from my cultural context. It's so I know I'd been in Russia a while when I was in a hotel, and they tried to give me $1,000 laundry bill. And I took the bill and I just threw it in the guy's face and went, I will not pay this. And like, in Russian, and my wife was just like, now you have become a real Slavic man, because like in her cultural context, like that sort of like intense challenge is not only okay, it's desirable. Whereas in Britain, they'd probably just call the police, right? They'd be like, you can't do that. So like the cultural embodiments we pick up can bring us range as well, I would say.
Okay. So as we're sadly coming towards the end of our time together, have you got another practice that we could play with whilst we're all together?
Breathe. There you go. And again, do you want to breathe more relaxed? Maybe slower, deeper? Or maybe you want to energize yourself. Maybe you're bored and you kind of got something to do now. You want to breathe a bit more in the chest, right? Make a choice. You want to smooth the edges off the breathing. Breathe more like the cat or more like a tiger. And if you were to visualize a color that you were breathing, what might that be? How does it impact you to change the color? Do not believe a word I say. Always experiment with your own embodiment.
I'm away with the fairies. That's quite nice.
You're breathing unicorn, a rainbow colored breath. It's a fun one to play with. So this is just little tools. There's loads of them online, and there's loads of them on YouTube, and you can see how you can apply this to coaching. I hope, even if you just do that. Feel free to steal the ABC centering, by the way. There's a little video online if you want a review of it, or you can go for the book if you want to go really into it. But even the video is enough. Like if you do that at the beginning of a coaching session, you will save 10 minutes of bullshit minimum. Just very, very quickly say, John, do you mind if I interrupt you? I can tell you're busy. You must be having a hard day. Breathe. Okay, relax your belly. Put your feet on the ground. Okay, tell me again what you want to get from today's session. Then you're going to get a much better answer than if you just let them do that from a hyperarousal fight or flight. Yeah, so that's one thing you can all sort of take away and use. I hope you don't need to be a Aikido master to do that. I mean, all the things I teach coaches are non-athletic, practical. We teach like 7 basic tools on EFC, but even more profoundly is to understand the principles. That takes a bit longer than an hour. Once you understand the principles, you can invent your own tools. Yeah.
And the Embodied Conference, when is that?
13 months from now, 1,000 speakers, at least 100,000 people, probably far more. So watch this space. It's going to be released in a couple of weeks. It's on Zoom, and it's bold. It's bold. If anyone's rich and wants to lend me money, feel free, because I need £100,000 for the Facebook ads alone. But I think we got our first investor, so we're rolling. So it's going to be by far probably the biggest event on the internet ever, actually.
Okay. I love your ambition.
So,
and if people are curious to know more about the facilitator course,
embodiedfacilitator.com. If someone could put that in the chat, I'd appreciate it.
I'll put it in. You
can apply, and we don't start till next May, but we've already had a bunch of applications all over the world as per normal. So yeah, it's not for everyone. You've seen my style though, so there's other co-teachers there as well, but the style tends to be fun but also very pragmatic, and it's quite hard work. It's a few hours a week for 9 to 10 months, so it is a commitment.
Thank you. As we draw to a close, what questions have you guys got that might be bubbling around your heads, or even share your noticings? Because I think I know many of you on this call, and facilitators, coaches, trainers, yourselves. What is it that you're even noticing that you'd love to share? Because I think that's equally important for us right now.
Share the Embodied Yoga Principles site as well. So for people who are more yoga teachers or love yoga, there's that one. Embodied more for coaches. And the podcast's well worth a download if you like podcasts. Personally, I love podcasts because you don't have to sit in one place. You can do them while you're going about business and doing the washing up and walking.
I can see people sort of thinking or typing.
Come on, questions coming through. You could follow me on Facebook, but that's not for the easily offended. Or Instagram. Actually, one of the questions we ask people on EFC is when you apply, because we have an interview, we only accept 50% of the people, is, do you believe in the concept of being offended? And if the answer is yes, then it's usually not a good fit.
Really? I like that.
I just get tired of people getting upset. It's like, come on, take responsibility for yourself.
Well, it's other...
Nice to meet you, Christina.
So as you're popping your questions in or your thoughts and your awareness, so there's a comments around engagement, good to be included, good to be reminded to include more play in my range. And that's the thing that I was taking away from you, Mark, is getting to know what my range is, and because I can be quite direct and to the point, and I'm learning to sort of evolve and maybe a softer style as well. And what is my range and how far can you go? And I am very British at times, and I recognize, you know, polite button, don't want to offend, but then I've worked in multiple cultures as well, and I've recognized I have to shift. I can't be British when I'm in Asia, I can't be British when I'm in India, because it just does not fit, does not work.
Yep. Yep, cultural limitations and cultural range. Obsessed with that, just because I teach this stuff all over the world, so I really see that in operation, you know. Certain people are definitely easier to teach.
So you can see the thoughts coming through the chat box. So there's other people saying, thanks for the challenge to myself with a body and practice, which is at the edge of my range. So if we're yogis, what else could we be? What's the antithesis to that? Or even a shift in my yoga practice.
Yeah, you can shifting your current practice can be easy, and developing a whole new practice sometimes.
Massively.
And I just say for everyone here, like, if you want to take something away, take away a practice, like checking in with yourself 5 times a day, or centering yourself 5 times a day, or, you know, reviewing your own yoga practice. Like, that's going to be way more useful than, you know, reading my book or looking at my website, which is great. You'll see a lot of cool stuff on there, and coaching demo sessions, which is the one thing we haven't done today. But, you know, take away your own practice, I think, would be maybe the final thought I'd leave you with.
Cool. So as we bring this to a close, I just want to say a massive thank you to Mark. You can find out more about Mark and the Embodied Facilitator on www.embodiedfacilitator.com. We'll put a link below so you can follow that. Thank you for all of those who joined us live, and if you're listening on a replay, let us know your thoughts. What do you do as your own embodied practice? What do you take away from this conversation? But I just like to say thanks to everyone for joining us here today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Kirsty. That was fun. The hour went by like that, so it's just good fun, wasn't it? So I enjoyed
Thank you, guys.
Take care.